Here we go. Morning, everybody.
Morning.
So we have more people on Zoom than in person today. I wonder why.
Yeah.
Okay. So just a quick reminder that next week we're not going to have a class because I'm going to be literally on Tuesday. I'm going to be all the way in the south by the border with Gaza. So we will get together again in 2 weeks.
When are you going to Israel?
I'm leaving Saturday night, Sunday morning.
This coming?
Yeah. Oh. Okay, let's start. So this is our second mechanism that we're going to talk about, why good people do bad things. And it's interesting that, we're in Sefer Shmot, and when you read Sefer Shmot, it's very hard to, it's very obvious. Look, there's one motif that comes back all the time. The book starts with the slavery, as we talked about last week, right? Slavery of Bnei Israel in Egypt. Difficult situation. And they cry out to God. 210 years of slavery, horrible times, right? Slaughtering the babies. And we talked about it. And yet, when the opportunity was given to them to leave Mitzrayim, they refuse. Moshe comes to them and says, I came to get you out of Egypt. And the reaction, ולא שמעו אל משה מקוצר רוח ומעבודה קשה. They didn't listen to Moshe. And it comes to that point that, as we said last time, that Yetziat Mitzrayim had to be in Beyad Chazaka, with strong hand. And the pasuk that we quoted last time, Beyad Chazaka yegarshem me'artzo, with a strong hand, he will have to kick them out of Egypt. And we said that according to Mefarshim and Rashi, among them says, Be'al kocham, against their will. Right? And we said, and we talked about that last week, like if things are so bad, then why don't they jump on the opportunity and leave Egypt? Why do you need to kick them out? Okay, so we dealt with that last week, but the question becomes even more severe because every time later on, for 40 years in the desert, every time there's a challenge, every time there's an issue, they want to go back to Egypt. So it was not like a one-time thing, but rather it continues. When there's no water in Marah, they cry, Lama elitunu mimitzrayim. They didn't say only I'm thirsty, there's no water. So why did you take me out of Egypt? Right? When they come to Elim, they said, Mi yiten mutenu be'eretz Mitzrayim b'shivteinu al sira basar. We remember Mitzrayim, we were sitting there, we had food. We're here to die in the desert. All of a sudden, Egypt looks like a good place. They had food, they had water, everything is fine. And in a couple of weeks in the Parsha, they say if you remember the sin of the spies, they say, Nitna rosh v'nashuva Mitzrayim. Let's turn around and start walking back to Mitzrayim. And every time they want to go back to Mitzrayim. And the question is, why? Why aren't they happy with the freedom that they were given? What is going on? Why Mitzrayim is so attractive? And this idea we see also not when Moshe came to Bnei Israel, as I mentioned before, earlier, when Moshe came to Bnei Israel, they couldn't listen to him. They were like, it's hard labor, slaves. They don't have the mental capacity. They're too busy with the everyday survival. They can't even listen to him. That's not the question. Who is this guy? He is the Prince of Egypt. Maybe there's a hidden agenda. I don't know. Should I trust this guy? He promised me all those promises. I don't know if I can trust him. Okay, I understand that. But our question is harder and harder to understand. Why they continue talking about Mitzrayim when they already left? They're already free. They're being taken care of. And they still, I didn't count, but how many times, every time there's a challenge in the desert, they want to go back to Mitzrayim. They already saw the plagues in Mitzrayim. They were already deported from Mitzrayim. They saw all the miracles, splitting of the Red Sea, whatever, giving of the Torah, all that kind of stuff. Okay. In Parashat Beshalach, in the beginning, it says, "Vayi beshalach paro et ha'am, ולא נחם אלוהים דרך ארץ פלישתים כי קרוב, כי אמר אלוהים פן ינחם אותה מלחמה ושבו מצרימה." In other words, even though the shortest route to get from Mitzrayim to Eretz Israel is through the land of Plishtim, God says they can't handle it. If they have to fight the Plishtim, they're going to go back to Mitzrayim. They're not, and therefore, ויעשב אלוהים את העם דרך המדבר, ים סוף וחמושים עלו בני ישראל מארץ מצרים. They take a detour. They take a detour through the Midbar in order to avoid that war and in order to avoid them going back to Egypt. Question is why? Mitzrayim was bad, really bad. They slaughtered their babies. They were slaves. And nonetheless, the Pasuk says that they might, God recognized, they might go back to Egypt. And when they come to the shore of Yam Suf, the Torah says, Pharaoh is getting closer, and they cry, "Hamibli en kvarim b'Mitzrayim lakachtanu lamut b'midbar." What? There are not enough graves in Egypt, cemeteries in Egypt. You need to take us here. Mazot asit alan. What are you doing to us? We are. This is what we told you. They said to Moshe, this is what we told you in Egypt. Leave us alone so we can work for Mitzrayim. We prefer, it's better for us to work, to be slaves in Mitzrayim than dying here in the desert. How many times, by the way, the word Mitzrayim appears in those psukim, those 3 psukim? 6 times. That place that was so terrible becomes home sweet home that they long for. And Moshe, yeah. Correct, it's the same root, yes.
So memory, what I find so fascinating is every time they fantasize about this wonderful need and kill the one person, and which did not happen.
Correct. So it's the same idea. It's the same idea. And Moshe answers, "Hityatzvu u'u et yeshuat Hashem." Right? Stand up and see the salvation. "Ki kasher reitem et Mitzrayim hayom lo tosifun lirotam od ad olam." This is the last time you will ever see the Egyptians. What is exactly that Moshe says? Stop. Okay, let's picture that for a second. Paro is getting closer. In front of them is the sea. And they're crying. Moshe said, stop. They want to go back to Mitzrayim. They want to turn and go back to Mitzrayim. Moshe said, stop. Look things are going to work out. And he adds, Hashem yilachem lachem v'atem tacharishun. God is going to fight for you. You're going to be silent. You're not going to do anything. Completely passive. And immediately after that, God says to Moshe, very strangely, Mati tzak elai. What are you crying to me? God says to Moshe. Daber lebnei Yisrael ve'yisau. Talk to the people of Israel and go. And the question is, Mati tzak elai. What are you talking about, Mati tzak elai? Why? It's totally understandable why Moshe is crying to God. There is no solution, right? If there's any situation in life that requires crying to God, it is that situation. The Egyptians are behind me. The sea is in front of me. I'm stuck in a hard place. What if I'm not going to cry to God? What else can I do? And then the question is, what's the meaning of Daber bnei Israel v'yisau? Talk to the people of Israel and go. Go where? To Mitzrayim? Back to slavery? Go into the sea to die? To drown? Because the solution, we already know this story, that the sea is going to split. That appears only in the pasuk later. Lift your hand, take your staff, hit the water, and split it. That, we know about that. Moshe doesn't know about that. The people of Israel don't know it. And that solution appears only later. It's the next verse. So here, go where? Where is supposed to go? And nobody could imagine that this is going to be the solution. Nobody could imagine that, sure, the sea is going to split. Of course, makes a lot of sense. No one can imagine that. But what's interesting, let's pay attention that unlike Moshe, that says, Hityatzvu ur'u, Moshe is talking about being completely passive. Hashem yilachem lachem v'atem tacharishun. You're going to be passive. God is going to do the work for you. He's going to fight for you. God's narrative is totally different. Daber bnei Israel ve'yisau. Go. Active. I don't know where. Go. Don't be passive. That's the difference here. And I think the Torah is giving us a hint now to that mechanism that will explain to us why Bnei Israel want to go back to Mitzrayim. So last week we started talking about this idea why good people do bad things, or why good people avoid doing good things sometimes even when they have the opportunity to do so. And we said that if we're going to identify those mechanisms, social, psychological, maybe we can make this world a little bit better. And this mechanism, a lot was written about it, psychology. It's called the default effect. Default effect. There are millions of examples for that. Most cases, people, instead of being active and choose what is right, or choose wrong, will go to the default. Here's a famous example. There was a huge study that was done. I don't remember when, comparing two countries. And It was about organ donation. The law was exactly the law in both countries. There was no difference in the law. The case was again the case. The difference was, in one place, the practice was that organ donation and harvesting organs is the default unless the family objects to it. I think it was somewhere in Scandinavia, I don't remember. And the other side was that organ donation and harvesting organs is only if the family asks for it. Again, in both places, we're talking about somebody, you know, it's not that we're talking about like a place where organ donation is against the law or something. It's absolutely not true. That's not the case. Okay? The patient is dead. Doctors want to use the organs. There's no, you know,
Going back.
Advanced directive. There's whatever. The family has the power to decide what to do. Okay? What's the difference is the default. The default is whether the hospital can harvest the organs unless the family objects to it, or the default is that one may not harvest unless the family gives the green light. And you know what's the result of that study? 82. So the question is not whether to donate organs, but rather to change the default. In the countries where it is permissible to take organs unless the family object, only 20% of the families object to it, for whatever reason. On the other hand, on the countries where the default is not to harvest the organs, only 20% donate willingly the organs. Another example. Statistics teach us, for example, that in places where the default is that the internet is open, completely open, including sites of pornography and violence or whatever. When the internet, there are no filters to the internet. Most users are not going to go and put filters on the internet. However, in places where the default is that there are filters and certain sites are restricted, you can, if you want, you can, set this and lift those restrictions, right? Most people are not going to ask for that permission. In other words, many cases, the way I behave is not exactly an outcome of what I think is right and wrong, but rather what is the default in reality. If the internet is completely open, I might go into a site that is whatever, violent or whatever, that kind of stuff. But if the internet is not there and I have the ability, I can change that on my computer. I can change that to allow myself access. I'm not going to do that though.
But we have examples from today, for instance.
Okay.
To eat Hamas first of the freedom kidney.
I really don't think that this is, I don't think that this is, that's absolutely not true.
It's also,
That's not even close, but let's hold that. to the end, okay? A lot of other examples. So look, for example, marketing. If you're not going to let us, if you don't contact us, you don't tell us or whatever, then automatically we're going to renew your prescription. Remember that? You know that, right? Millions of every month automatically. So you can do that, right? If you're not going to tell us, unless you notify or whatever, unless you're going to get all our junk mail, whatever, all that kind of stuff, right? So you have the option to opt out from all those, but the statistic teaches that very few people actually do that. And this mechanism of choosing the default is what causes good people to do bad things or not to do good things that they can. Why? Because you need to be active, because you need to actually do something. Okay? And in most cases, most people are going to choose the default. Bnei Israel choose Mitzrayim, not because it was good, they were slaves, but that's the default. That's what they're used to. This is like they don't have to do anything for that. And when they compare the unknown in the desert, the court compare that to the slavery in Egypt, they choose the default, which is the familiar Egypt. Sometimes when I think about it, I feel really nauseous. How many times I've made mistakes, I chose wrong in my life just because it was the default. Because doing the right thing would require to be active, to do something. And being active many times has a price. And Chazal take it and they say, Rabbi Yoshua says, Shev ve'al ta'aseh adif. In other words, if I debate, if I consider whether to do A, and it has a price, or to do B, which also have a price, then the solution is C, do nothing. It's easy, correct. Okay, here's something that, one of my kids wanted to watch something, and I said, you don't understand that you have a test tomorrow. If you're gonna do that, then you're gonna fail in the test because you have, right? So this is but if you're going to learn for the test, you're gonna miss the fun with your friends, right? So we understand that every choice has a price for it. And what people, very often do, sit at home, do nothing.
That's the most.
Right? And a very, 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 very famous story that is brought in the Talmud is the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. So I'm going to read that. The story, as it appears in the Tractate of Gittin, tells of a wealthy man who lived in the 1st century, like the times of, right, in the temple, for an upcoming party. He sent his servant to deliver an invitation to his friend, a man named Kamsa. However, the servant mistakes the recipient as Bar Kamsa, an enemy of the wealthy man. Upon seeing the hated Bar Kamsa at his party, the host orders him to leave. Bar Kamsa, attempting to save face, thrice offers to make peace with the host, first offering to pay for the food he eats, then for half of the expenses of the party, and then for the entire party, each time rebuffed by the angry host. Finally, the host forcibly removes Bar Kamsa in the presence of the communal leaders present, rabbis, who lacked the courage to protest his shameful actions. Humiliated, Bar Kamsa vows revenge against the rabbis present who did not defend him, allowing him to be publicly embarrassed. He visits the Roman Caesar, who controls the region, and tells him the Jews are inciting to revolt against the Roman Empire. The Caesar, unsure of whether to believe Bar Kamsa, sends an animal to be sacrificed as a peace offering in the temple in Jerusalem, along with Bar Kamsa. On the way, Bar Kamsa purposely slightly wounds the animal in a way that would disqualify it as a Jewish sacrifice, but not as a Roman offering. Upon seeing the disfigured animal, the rabbis of the Sanhedrin present at the temple have to make a decision as to how to respond to the delicate situation presented. Some advocate dispensing with the law and offering the animal anyway to avoid war. This plan is vetoed by Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulus, who fears that people will begin to bring blemished animals to the temple to be sacrificed. They then suggest putting Bar Kamsa to death to prove that he is at fault. But again, Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulus refuses, because this is not the mandated penalty for intentionally bringing a disqualified offering to the temple. And then Rabbi Yochanan, a very famous saying, says, because of the actions of Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulus, the temple was destroyed and the Jews were exiled from the land. So Zechariah ben Avkulus, his approach is basically the Sheva al Taseh, be passive. If you have choice A and you have choice B, both are, there's a price for it, there's consequences. He's not wrong. However, he chooses C, do nothing. Come the Chachamim, Rabbi Yochanan, and says that brought the destruction of Yerushalayim. So the Chachamim says that the ability to choose the default, not to do something, is very, very bad. Yes. Bnei Israel says, Egypt is bad. But I already know that bad. I know that. I know what I'm dealing with. So after hundreds of years of slavery, and I can go out, and we already left Mitzrayim, but now there's a challenge, so let's go back. Going back to Mitzrayim is the default of Bnei Israel. And therefore, you need to kick them out. In order to change the default, you need to do something active. And because of that default of Sheva al Taseh, the Talmud teaches us that the temple was destroyed and we went to exile. Professor Dan Ariely, Israeli professor in Duke University, behavioral economics, and also psychology, I think. You really want to read his books, or at least watch his videos, TED Talks. Over 15 million views. And he consults many companies about sales and marketing. And he says something that we were familiar with, that in order to increase your sales, you need to minimize the actions needed. Okay? If I buy online, for example, and there's like 6, 7 stages, I need to browse, I need to put this, I need to do that, and then the payment, and then it's like, there are more chances that I'm going to drop it throughout the process somewhere in the middle. But if the process is very simple, requires from me almost nothing. As soon as I, yeah, it's one click, boom, they have better chance of selling that. Okay, today with cookies and all that kind of stuff, I don't even have to browse. It's like if you look for something online, automatically stuff like that are going to jump already, right? Because then they know that that's what you're looking for. So they don't even have to look for that product. It's going to come to you. So we all know, for example, we talked about it. The magazine is free. The first month is free, or whatever that is. The first month is free, or in reduced price. And if you don't like it, it's fine. Just let us know, and we're going to cancel your subscription and all that kind of stuff. And most people are not going to do that. Why? Because that becomes the default. And now we're getting all those stupid magazines to your home that you never read, and all that kind of stuff, right? Because in order to stop receiving that magazine or that whatever I'm getting that I don't need in my life, all that kind of stuff, I need to do something. I need to be active in order to stop that. In order to do something, actively to do something, this is something that people don't do easily. So sometimes it's just a few dollars a month, but it's not a moral injustice. But sometimes it's the same mechanism that causes good people to do bad things, horrible things, even for a long time. Why? Because we have that mechanism called default, and it's kind of automatic. People who do not donate the organs of their loved ones, it's not always because they object for religious reasons or moral reasons or whatever you want to call it. They object to that, but rather because it requires an action. It requires them to be active, to ask for it. And being active at those times of life, when somebody experiences loss, it's not that easy. It's not easy. It's not simple. Let's go back to Moshe and Bnei Israel at the sea, the shore. He says to them, when Bnei Israel want to go back to Mitzrayim as the default, he says to them, no, the default is here. Be passive. Hashem ilachem lachem, because most of us are really passive. Atem tacharishon, you don't need to do anything. That's the default. The default is already going to get you to Eretz Israel. And God says to Moshe, no. Matitzaka, what do you want from me? You need to move. You need to be active. You have to change. Where? Doesn't matter. Somewhere. Into the sea. The sea is going to split. Whatever. It doesn't matter. But being static is choosing nothing. That's the default. And that's the bad way. So Bnei Israel, when they leave Mitzrayim, if you remember, there's one word that we repeat that, it's bechipazon, right? And rush. And that's not so understandable, because God tells the Israelites already like 10 days before to take the say, get ready, blah, 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 whatever. And he already tells them 10 days before, that the Korban Pesach, you're going to eat bechipazon already. You're going to be in a rush. Meaning it's a planned rush. They have like 10 days to prepare. So, or a week or whatever. So why there has to be a rush? You can pack. You can prepare bread that rises. We don't have to eat matzah. Why is the rush? No, but he tells them, this is your itinerary. You're gonna leave on that night. Nobody prevents them from preparing. They could prepare, pack, bake the bread. Nonetheless, they are commanded from the very beginning to leave Mitzrayim in a rush. כי גורשו ממצרים ולא יכלו להתמהמה. They couldn't take their time. Why? They had time. They could plan ahead. Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin, in the first paragraph of his book, Tzidkat HaTzadik, Righteousness of the Righteous. Okay, this is a little bit Hasidic, okay? So bear in mind with me. He writes the following. ראשית כניסת האדם לעבודת השם צריך להיות בחיפזון. The beginning of a person's entrance into the service of God must be rushed. כמו שמצינו בפסח מצרים, שהיה נאכל בחיפזון ולא פסח דורות. As we found regarding the eating of the first Passover sacrifice in Egypt, it was eaten in a rush, but the Passover of subsequent generations was not eaten in a rush. מפני שההתחלה לנתק עצמו מכל תאוות העולם הזה, שהוא מקושר בהם, צריך לשמור הרגע שמתעורר בו רצון השם ולחפוז על אותו רגע, למהר לצאת מהם אולי יוכל. Brilliant. For when one begins to cut oneself off from all desires of this world to which one is connected, one must be aware of the moment wherein the desire to serve God awakens. One must rush to that moment and hurry to escape. Maybe it is then possible. ואחר כך, שוב ילך במתינות ולאט כדין פסח דורות. And then, later, one can go along moderately and slowly, like the laws of the Passover of subsequent years. There are moments in life that if you're not going to do, if you're not going to create a change, if you're not going to do something at that moment with a lot of force, energy, then you're never going to leave Egypt. And therefore, the first thing has to be with a rush. You can't prepare yourself slowly. And that is true for many revolutions and changes. You know, many times, usually in life, we say, okay, slowly. We say in German, langsam, langsam, aber sicher. Yeah, slowly, but safe. But also, it's very important to pay attention where is that default is harming us. And then you have to be in a rush and get out and do something. And we all been there. There are moments in life that you know there's a momentum. You have to do it and you have to jump into the water. And if you're not going to do that, you're going to miss the opportunity. It's much more comfortable, perhaps, and familiar. And, you know, it's like, okay. A couple of weeks ago, came to me a young couple from the shul. And I have a relationship with them. And they came to me and they were really thinking, you know, they really like the community. They want to stay. They want to, all that kind of stuff. They don't know if they can afford it and whatever. And they lose so much money on the rent every month. And they found a house and they really, really like that house. And they were approved for the mortgage. And they get, but it's a lot of money and they don't know, should they do that? And there's so many risks and whatever. And I said, listen, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but sometimes there are moments in life you just need to jump. You love the community, you really want to stay here. You found the house that you like, that you want to live, raise your family in that house. Jump. You can do it. Like, you did the math. You can make it happen in terms of the mortgage and the payments. Sometimes you need to jump. I remember when I proposed to Taylor, it was not really planned, I have to be honest. I was driving, like, I met her in Tel Aviv. I was living in Yerushalayim at that time. And I remember being on the phone with a good friend of mine and talking to him, and like things kind of like personalized to me and whatever. And I just said to myself, I remember when, like, after talk, like, the conversation ended, and I said to myself, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it now. And like, it's not that all of a sudden I got some clarity or the answers for my questions and all that kind of stuff. I felt that there's a momentum, right? And I just did that. That's it. And I had to jump into the water. Where I see it like all the time? It's when there's a momentum, when you work with somebody. I work with, bar mitzvah kids, or sometimes like in school, like with younger kids, and you see that they're like, it takes time to get them to leave behind their kind of like what is easier and familiar. Okay, I'll make it clearer. I have a kid. It's very hard for him to read Hebrew. Very, very hard. Doesn't go to Jewish school, whatever. So it's very, very hard. And so it's easier to memorize the text. And I fight with him, and I said, you got to read it. You got to read it. You got to fight it. You got to read it. And at some point, because I'm nudge, sometimes they surrender and they start actually struggle with the ring. And I know that is the moment that I need to push them, because that's a momentum. If I'm going to push them, they're going to continue reading. And if they continue reading, that's it. They're on the right track. If I'm going to say, okay, fine, it's to, they're going to go back to the easy choice, which is the default. I'm just going to look at that and memorize it. And that's it. I don't, because that would, but you're limited in what you can do. It's like when kids, for example, start playing an instrument and they play by ear, right? So they do a wonderful job. They can play by ear, but they're going to be limited to how far they can go because they don't read music, right? So it's the familiar. Like, I'm good. Now I'm going to go to like, I already play songs. Why would I do that, right? So there's sometimes in life there are momentum, and you just need to do that. So Zechariah ben Avkurus, from the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, he was a pious person. But because he was so pious, perhaps, he preferred the default, which was not to kill Bar Kamsa, but also not, on the other hand, not to accept that sacrifice. We're going to choose to do nothing. We're just not going to do anything, and we're just going to see what's going to happen. Well, that got Beit HaMikdash destroyed, and we got into and we left to an exile. And the Torah warned us from that mechanism. There's a Hasidic drush on this pasuk. Hashem yilachem lachem ve'atem tacharishun. Chana is going to like it. Yilachem is not in the sense of will fight, right? The shosh of milchama, war, lachem, to fight, but rather yilachem is from the word lechem, bread. Okay, it's not really grammatically it's incorrect, but Chassidim, let's not be stickler to the details. And the word tacharishun, which is from the word cheresh, quiet, right? He reads it as charish, plowing. In other words, if you are going to plow the fields, God is going to give you bread. Hashem yilachem lachem ve'atem tacharishun. God will provide you bread if you will tacharishun, if you're going to plow the land. It's just a sec. So we don't encourage to be passive. We encourage to be active. You need to be active. If you want to avoid going back to Egypt, you have to look at the practice. You need to check, what am I doing? Why am I doing what I'm doing? I'm doing it because it's right. Okay, continue. But if I'm doing it because it's the default, then perhaps it's time to rethink my actions. Okay, that's it for today. Question? Yeah. Of course. Bitachon. Bitachon is nice, but when you don't see the option, nobody could imagine that the sea is going to split. It's not something that you can, right? So I'm hesitant to say, I trust God and that's it. It's like I don't have to do anything about that. And I have a problem with that approach. My approach is I have to do everything in my power, and then acknowledge the fact that not everything is in my power. And I want to believe that God is going to help, but I have to do everything in my power. Like, say, okay, God will help.
It's like the story of Moshe.
Yeah.
He prayed to God.
Okay, why am I laughing already? No.
He prays to God to win the lottery. He says, I daven 3 times a day. I learn every day, and I give tzedakah. And God, the heavens open, and the message from God is, Friday you win the lottery. Comes Friday, tunes in the TV before Shabbat, the announcements about who's winning the lottery, and it's not Moshe. But Moshe again, Motzei Shabbat, he prays to God, he says, God, you promised me I'd win the lottery. And God says, did you buy a ticket? Anyway.
Right. Yes.
So it's the church. We're waiting for the miracle or the actions. And we know that miracles don't.
We don't rely on the miracle. We can have faith in God, but we do not rely on the miracle. We do our best.
During push not to have miracle of God.
Correct. But we don't live in that period. We live in a different period in history where the miracles are hidden.
Yeah, God.
No, they're not gone. They're happening every day. We say it in the Modim. V'al nisecha shebechol yom imanu. We have millions of miracles every day. Like the fact that you woke up in the morning, the fact that you have a roof on your head, The fact that nobody crashed into on your way here, the fact that you opened the fridge in the morning to get some milk for your coffee, and actually the milk was not bad, so you had a cup of coffee for a millions of things every day that you got into your car and it's actually turned on. There are tons of miracles. You went to the bathroom, that's a miracle. You were able to, everything is a miracle, but you need what?
And so many people survive, and every single person in their life has their personal miracle.
Correct.
And very often it must be because they did something. My uncle was saying because he did something active. He told the people, he had some neighbors who was getting.
Okay. Anyone has a question from here? No? Okay. Thank you, Steve. Okay, bye-bye, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
נסיעה טובה.
Thank you.
Have a safe trip.